Hi everyone, welcome to the SUSE QE Tools workshop. And we learned there was a bit of a confusion regarding the time. So this is now on 0800 UTC or Zulu time, which in European time zone is 10 o'clock local time. I'm wondering, we tried to fix the time to UTC, but if this is in conflict with too many other events that are on a recurring schedule, overlapping now during the daylight saving time, then we can also accommodate that by, again, moving this meeting earlier. You are welcome to use the chat here in Jitsi and just provide a short feedback if you want the meeting to say UTC or move it to European local time or a different time. So yeah, feel welcome to provide suggestions and your opinion in the chat here, and we will record that and think about if we should move.
And yeah, one brief note on that. Apparently my previous calendar fix hadn't worked, so I fixed the calendar again and also clarified the description, and I think now people are getting the updated event, which was mistakenly created in the wrong time zone when it was the same effectively, so I hadn't realized it was wrong before.
That's good, thank you. The topic for today is SUSE QE Tools SUSE QE Tools roadmap. And we try to do that every first Friday of every month. And again, this was an exception this month. We skipped the last meeting due to Good Friday. And we plan to be strict about the schedule again starting next month. So every first Friday, every month, we will present recent achievements, the midterm plan, and future outlook. And for this, I suggest that we reserve some time until minute 15 for the recent achievements, then another 15 for the midterm plan, and then the future outlook combined with an open discussion, your wishes expressed, your questions and discussions regarding the prioritization of tasks and the further plan based on that. Okay. So first, what I will show you is following the query on the wiki page. Let me go to the top, how you can find that. In how we work, we have these links to the complete backlog, which is everything that is still open and planned on the backlog of the SUSE QE Tools. Then a sub part of that is a high-level view. This is all epics and higher. And then we have a top-level view, which is abstracted, so it's only a handful of sagas that aggregates and combines the plan on the bigger level. There's a query for if you're interested in what the members of the team are currently working on, to check the progress and to know what we are currently being occupied with, and maybe also, what you can expect to be ready or maybe impacting you in what time after that. And then there is a query closed within last 60 days. This was recently resolved. The selection of 60 days is certainly a bit arbitrary. So in that case, because we had the last SUSE QE Tools roadmap meeting 35 days ago, I selected here 35. In overview, we had 49 tickets on our backlog done. Let's start from the top. So blank means these tickets do not have a category. This is most often because they are in a specific project, namely a lot regarding the infrastructure. There's always so far something in the infrastructure, either issues that we need to handle, like that a certain machine is unreachable and unreliable reboots, as well as the plan to improve this. One one topic that we recently achieved was we had problem with unreliable reboots of the machine. When every time we reboot a machine within the OSD infrastructure, we try to recreate the file system that is used for the Openga workers as a scratch file system, and that was not always working fine. What we did there is basically, after we found a potential fix, ensured within a loop, we rebooted specific machines 30 times in a row to ensure that this is really stable and working. This is not. Then what else? There was this task about Power VM knowledge consolidation. And as you might remember, we also had a workshop topic about that, where Nick Singer led us through how to handle Power VM machines with the toolset that we have at hand. And after we had that done and linked and further information on our wiki page on how we can handle that for specific issues as it concerns us as Openga workers, that is solved as part of this. And then there was one more topic which I'm explain to you myself, is that was a long-standing plan to have Python bindings for Openga tests, which basically means that you can write Openga test modules in Python code. And now experimental support for that is included. So you can do that if you follow the documentation on OS Autoinst, how to write new test modules. Then it mentions that you can use Perl, and it also mentions that you can use Python. If you're happy to try it out, please see it as experimental support so far. It hadn't been used in test modules other than the experimental self-test modules so far. But I would be very interested in hearing a result from you about that.
Oliver, can you show an example of it? Because I work on something that I use some Python libraries to run, but I use the Perl above to actually run it. So I would be interested to see an example.
Okay, let me see if I have an example ready. Sorry, I need to click around here a bit. So, but basically we have test modules within OS Autoinst as a self-test. So one example would be, let's see, for example, typing. Just to note, this is a standard Perl-based test module. Looks like this: use strict warnings, test API, sub-run, and then you have a search group. Now a corresponding Python test module. So instead of PM, we have the extension .py. And it can look like this, that you use Python code to say from test API import, and just the same, you define a run method, and then you use the methods as you know them from the test API, which is send key, check screen. Of course, here, this is Python code. So what you can do is you can import Python modules. If you have Python modules that you would like to use in your test, then you can import that in the Python module. This Python code is actually also started from Perl code, essentially. So within ISO2Video, where we load all the test modules, we dynamically load and define the code from each test module. For Perl codes, that is directly included as Perl code. And for Python modules, we use a Perl Python wrapper to load that code. So, yeah, Anton?
I wonder how this decision was made. What do you see the benefits of this decision? And yeah, and if you consider all negative effects of such introducing such feature.
Right. So the two benefits which I see with that, one is that if one really has the, the mental block to say, I don't ever want to touch any Perl code and maybe starting a new project, then one can try out the Python. And the second benefit could be that if one already is aware of certain Python modules, let's say any kind of external Python module that one wants to use in the test code, then that is now possible in a more streamlined way to directly import that Python module. The caveat and the potential drawback which I see with that is that, of course, if we have an existing code base like in OS Audience Distri OpenSUSE, it could introduce a mess if people start to duplicate functionality in different programming languages, which actually shouldn't be necessary, because either this is done for completely different use cases, or it is done in a way where actually we can just reuse the same code. So just one example is that we did not re-implement the test API completely or anything like that. So if anyone would add a new test API method in OS Audience, then the Python support would be transparent. There's no need to copy paste anything. This is done dynamically also using this Perl Python.
From, let's say, OpenQA pure perspective as a tool, I am super happy to have this feature because I definitely like Python more than Perl. It's my personal preference, but I would say that from perspective of OS Autoinst OpenSUSE distri repo, having a huge code base written in Perl and enable now Python will lead to, not potentially can lead, but I can say that it will lead to a lot of duplicated code, which would be like, we will have now Python lovers, which will say, like you are saying, we don't want to touch Perl anymore, and they will just close the Perl code and start writing Python code and start duplicating a lot of code. So I mean, like for OpenQA, it's totally fine as a tool, as separated code base, but I would strongly recommend to disable this feature for OpenQA OpenSUSE distri, because in my understanding it would bring more mess than it could bring positive sides. Just my opinion.
I also recommend that if we use that feature, then we use it to get experience with in another test distri, but not also in distri OpenSUSE for a start. If it can be integrated there, then I am sure it can be integrated in a way that no duplication is done, but under the same way as we already have a constant struggle with code duplication, the existing repository, that challenge will stay regardless, even if you allow or disallow that. I would say this is just one more point that test reviewers would keep in mind, and I'm also doing test review and also in distri OpenSUSE for that reason, to say, hey, you might think it's easy to copy paste today, but from tomorrow on we would have a maintenance burden. And so that challenge stays. And of course a policy could be to say we don't allow that, to use that within that specific test.
So I have a couple of points on that. So one, just to clarify, right now there's no specific Python specific code, right? Everything that is available is essentially Perl API that's being mapped to Python, right?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, so there's no duplication right now. So my second thought is, if, for example, somebody wants to experiment with writing existing test code, or maybe something new that we don't have yet, and see how that might work in Python, I think that's definitely something that should be coordinated, and for example, see if there's something new that's not really covered yet, and then we could, for example, consider moving certain tests if, say, everyone in the respective squad would be fine with that. I think that's a thing to keep in mind. So for now, I think there's no plan to add anything that we already have. But
Yeah. It should add, the main purpose really should be to open up to new use cases which so far are not covered at all. Obviously it's not meant to say to whoever is already accustomed to the current way to have any more work. Okay, but let's please stop it here. If you're interested, then we can also have a more specific topic about the Python or test backend in general in another meeting.
So maybe as a short query, would people be interested in a topic for follow-up workshop? Then I'm happy to add it to the list for future call. Then we can talk more about the Python bindings.
Yeah, and feel free to come up with some suggestions also in the chat here, and then we can accommodate that in the future schedule.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, I would like to also mention that, for example, we had this problem of people could not log into Openga SUSE and Openga SUSE.org. While certainly here we rely on on a service which is external to our team, but maintained by fellow friends and colleagues at the SUSE IT engineering infrastructure team or OpenSUSE heroes. There was a problem to log in that had been fixed meanwhile. I haven't seen that reappear so far. Similar issues could reappear. So problems like these make us also think how to handle that better in the future. So we are thinking about alternatives that we can offer so that the service is available. And service being available, I don't just mean that the web page of Openga is accessible and readable, but really usable completely as to your normal use cases. So one specific idea that we have there is to allow additional authentication providers to be used in parallel, so that if one doesn't work, we can switch, let's say, to use GitHub as an authentication provider in parallel. Then features that had been implemented. For example, there's one to allow to customize the worker engine by configuration. The idea here is that by default, we rely on auth audience that is installed on the OpenQA worker. But by configuration, given any allowances by security, app armor, and user permissions, and so on, it is possible that you trigger OpenQA tests and you give a test perimeter for which backend to use. And then the backend could, for example, be, let's say, instead of ISO to video, you can run Podman. And with Podman, you can download virtually any container image and run that as the backend. The backend, of course, needs to be compatible with auth audience. So in the most easy case, what you can do is you can just start yet another auth audience, but maybe it is an auth audience version that you change and adjust for a future feature, and you would like to actually try it out in production in more use cases. So this feature is meant for that purpose. Then we are in the process of changing the paths that are used to define the test cases, as well as needles, the product tier, main PM, and such. And the goal that we want to reach here midterm is that the paths are relative to case tier, and the settings that one can find in vars JSON is not specific to any workers. If you take a look right now, then it says something like either cache directory or it says something specific to the pool instance. And instead, we want to have relative directories which are the same for all. So that by that, we also have less problems if you, for example, use OpenQA clone custom Git rep spec. For example, if you want to clone from a caching worker to a non-caching worker, but change the Git repository and use custom needle directory, and this was or is problematic, and with this feature we would like to allow that as well. And then one final thing that I would like to mention is that likely this has gone unnoticed for most of you. OpenQA OpenSUSE.org is administered in a way that every day we have a nightly deployment of all the workers in the web UI, the latest state of the packages. For OpenQA SUSE.de, we previously had a weekly deployment, which is now switched to a 2-daily deployment, meaning much more often smaller deltas, less waiting time for new features. Right. Any feedback for the recently accomplished task? Anything that I forgot? Okay, good. Then the next step is the backlog. I'm going to open all 3 pages, and I'm trying to give a good overview. Currently, we have 91 tickets in our backlog. Out of these, we have 6 that are currently in progress, and then as a follow-up, 25 workable, which are defined enough so that we can pick them up, and then 3 new blocked. 3 new. In progress, we are currently working on tests for our container definitions that we already have in our OpenQA repos. We already have container definition files for the different components of OpenQA, and we already have Docker Compose. And what we want to do before we continue further in that direction is that we improve the test and make the test reliable for us, so that we can have a stable base for development in the future. We use both a CI test that is executing Docker Compose based on the Docker Compose definition that we have in our Git repo. So this is also what is spawned on every pull request to the OpenQA repository. But we also use the OpenQA in OpenQA tests. So where OpenQA is used to test OpenQA itself, because we had the feeling that this gives a better overview of the complete infrastructure, and also the OpenQA tests allow more easily, or allow at all, to spawn real nested virtual machines, which we would need to ensure that the complete chain is working.
What exactly the OpenQA test on OpenQA?
That you ask. So if we go to OpenQA OpenSUSE.org, and there are various job groups, for example, for Tumbleweed, also for OpenSUSE Open Build Service, but there's also a job group for OpenQA itself. And if you take a look in there, then what you can see is tests where we install OpenQA from packages, or we start OpenQA from our Git repository in an OpenQA test. So let me show you that one. For example, we boot Tumbleweed system as the development base, and then we go to a terminal, which is developer's friend. We install dependencies, and then we create a Postgres database, which we need for development. And then we clone the Git repository. We start OpenQA from there, which we check by checking that we have a local dashboard of OpenQA installed within that machine on local. Answers your question?
Yeah, so it's installation, but it's not any test for the APIs or anything, right?
It's testing the test API in the same way as we test within the CI tests, and that is we do have some some small test case. What the actual product that we test there is actually I can show you here. What was it? TinyCore OS? Yeah, here. We have an ISO image within the OS audience test repository, which is TinyCore. So we boot that system, we boot a VM from the ISO, we go into a terminal, we start a program, we type a lot of text so that we check typing stability. And this is what we do every time we create a pull request to OS order inst or OpenGA. And as well, we use the same in the OpenGA and OpenGA test. Okay?
Yeah, I just expected to see more testing the response from the request from the API request, but yeah, okay.
Maybe I can show you. Not sure if I find that immediately. But take a look here. This is the CI test that we run for OS order inst. And what we do there is we install package of course, and among others, we run here all the unit tests of OS order inst. And the last unit test, it's actually not a unit system, but there's one system test included, which is the 99 full stack T. What this one does, it starts ISO to video. And in ISO to video, it does what you do as same if you start ISO to video locally. The same what is done when an OpenGA worker starts ISO to video. Looks for a main PM file.
Yeah, right, but this is unit testing, right?
No, it's system test, because this really starts a VM within the CI job. We boot the complete ISO image and then type with VNC to QEMU, just the same as you would do if you run OS ordinance-based test anywhere else, based on the QEMU backend, not using physical hardware directly. And what you can see here, so we use load test boot, test assert screen, test typing, select console, fail, reload needles, modify, upload file, shutdown. So some functionality which we consider the most important and most basic to cover the most parts of the test API.
I see.
Right. Next, what we work on is reading out coverage information, and a bigger topic around that is to understand the test coverage, for example, in SUSE product QA validation, as well as in maintenance tests. Because we all know that we have certain tests, like an Apache test, but it's not ensured that this test is actually running in all products where it should be running. So we try to help with that and provide some data to help with this common effort to find out if we have the right test covering the right things. Yeah. Any questions about the in-progress tasks? Then I will continue with the next outstanding topics. I'm also mentioning the new because there are some which are seen as a higher priority, but they are not refined enough yet, so we don't know exactly what's going on. I already mentioned something about test coverage, so this is related to the topic which I just mentioned. And there's a problem in a limited area, in particular in where LTP tests are used, and they use dynamic test module definition and loading when the schedule has already been evaluated, and then rolling back after test failures seems to roll back to what is seen as the wrong snapshot within the audience chemo snapshots. So this is one topic. Another topic which had been opened just last night has been observed so far only in a Fedora environment, that some updates of some dependency package bring some problem regarding not properly delivered messages related to multi-machine tests. The next topics that are planned is, I already mentioned Python bindings, that so far it's an experimental feature that you're happy to try out. It's actually in production. It's just that if you use it, then you can. Just that we don't know how much works with there. And we have some plans to continue with that and streamline that with little steps. And what else? Okay, there's an alert that we want to handle. We have a storage server with a bit more storage, and we are exploring different ideas how to use that for different purposes. For example, to save a backup, to save an archive of test results that are not necessarily need to be accessible with in short time, but we still want to preserve that archive. Then some other problems, for example, job incomplete with audience log ending just in the middle. So sometimes there's still we try to improve the feedback from incomplete jobs, that it's more clear like what had been actually going on. But in some cases, there can be cases where we just end up with jobs that are incomplete and it just stopped somewhere, and also there's nothing obvious in the worker log. So these are cases that we want to take a look into and understand better. Then one ticket that Jane just picked up is to have complete test definition from a YAML schedule file in local test distribution folder. I already presented that last time. This is a time box spike solution to come up with something where we say we don't need, imagine a clean OpenK installation and there's nothing yet as configuration yet written in the OpenK database, and we want to define tests from there. Similar to the YAML test files used in all sorts of distro OpenSUSE, and extended on that concept on top.
That will be also something that will be interesting to present in some point when the spike finish.
Yes, yeah, of course. The purpose of the spike is to find out how we can continue with development. And of course, a part of the bigger story of what this is linked to. So this is linked to the saga about full version control awareness. And of course, that includes documentation as well as presenting the feature, as well as covering that in specific workshops, so that if we consider that a feature that should be helpful to more users. And we want to help you and other users to pick it up and use it. Then we will present it accordingly so that it can be actually. But we are not in the stage yet. It's more like we need to find out how that could be done and what implications this has. Can it be compatible with the old way of loading? Do we need to make some kind of hard switch? Do we need to define that per instance, per test distribution, per product maybe? So what else? Maybe there's some tickets where you say like, I'm eagerly waiting for that. When are you done? Maybe there's something which you had an idea and you wonder if we already tried to cover it.
First of all, one question come up, by the way, when you were saying about Fedora. Interesting question is to know how often they do deployment, how Fedora often do deployment on their instance, and also as I recently get knowledge there is Debian instance, how often they are doing deployment. Do you have any info about that?
I only know about the, but no, okay, sorry. I know a bit more. I know from the Debian instance that they try to use Debian packages for OpenGA. So whoever is maintaining these is certainly lagging a bit behind because they try to use all the dependencies from Debian packages, and hence also restricting the version of OpenGA that can be used, because sometimes we introduce a dependency for a newer version of, for example, Perl module releases, so they can't use the most recent version. So for them, it's a bit longer. For Fedora, I know that Adam Williamson is maintaining a staging instance, which he deploys more often to see if there will be any upcoming interesting things or upcoming problems, and then a production instance, which normally he deploys less often until last week, when I think by mistake he just deployed the most recent version. And so far it was working okay-ish, except for that problem that now popped up on his instance. And this is a problem which we have not seen within the SUSE or OpenSUSE infrastructure. So maybe this is because actually Fedora has not a more recent OpenGA version or so than we have, but some of the dependencies which can have an impact. But actually it could also be the opposite, that there's some outdated dependency and we are running a more recent one. We have never seen the problem, but we would see the problem when running the older one. There are other, let me see, OpenGA cubes OS, for example. So this is another instance. If you want to check what version is running, that's simple. You can click and see the changelog. And here you see that this is running a version from February 2021.
Okay, thank you. It was interesting. Another question you just asked about like issues which we think that they are hanging and when they will be done. I want to ask more generic question back. What currently is expected interface from OpenGA users to influence on your backlog and pop up some issues which OpenGA user thinks are important? Because general impression from what you just said, I see that you are more concentrated on backend, on tidy up your tests, and so on, and there is not much like usability issues ongoing, which of course you can say, yeah, but backend stability is also good for users and so on, but yeah, I would say
right.
There is like topic to discuss about priorities, and I would like to have such an interface for OpenGA user if it exists to know about it. If not, then we need to establish one.
Yeah, of course. Perfect. So we are in the last part of our workshop then, which you nicely introduced, is that we can talk about the further plan, the future outlook and such. So we try to have a good balance between the necessary infrastructure management, fixing long-standing problems, helping users with support requests, coming up with enhancements in our backend, as well as more user-facing features. I think we already do quite a lot of things that do have a direct impact on users, but not necessarily, bigger changes in the UI of the web UI. But if you take a look here, just comparing the number closed within the last 60 days, we had 24 bugs that we had been working on, 4 support requests, 4 organizational, but also 21 feature requests. And I would say this is pretty much on par with features. And feature requests, when we are talking about improving our test stability, and this is not a feature request, right? A feature request for us is really something that can have an impact, can have a benefit for the users. So let me try to find examples. So allow to customize worker engine by configuration. So this is something which you can control with a test variable. Every user can do that, but it doesn't mean any change in the web UI. The most recent bigger UI change that I can think of is the text field for Git commit details in Needle Editor. I think it didn't show up in before because this was actually before the last 35 days. So this is correct that it wasn't that recently. And we also have better error handling when reading API key and secret from the client script. This is also mostly based on actual support requests. So I'm trying to really take support tickets requests from you serious. So if you say like, hey, I have a problem, Openga client is not reading my API key, then I'm not just trying to say like, yeah, here's the documentation, fix it, but I'm trying to think about like, okay, how can we improve the client so that if another question, just 1 out of 100 persons maybe would be brave enough to open the support tickets, even though everybody's welcome to do that. We're happy to help there. But I can imagine that there are many more people that could benefit from a more streamlined user experience. But of course, this only covers some users. So it depends. It depends a bit on the specific work areas. Anton, I know that you have a specific work area which is, for example, you have more experience with multi-machine tests, and some other users have questions about the static backends, and some others would like to have more streamlined test review interface, which is impacting the UI. So these are all the different parts. But let me remind you, yeah, we want to talk about plans. So now I'd like to hand over to you. So what things are you looking for? What features have you raised? And you want to know, you can bring it up here, speak up, or write it in chat, or open tickets. You can open a ticket. You're welcome to open tickets. The worst thing that we could do is to handle the ticket, and no, actually the worst thing that we could do is ignore the ticket, which I will assure you we won't, and we will try to take requests serious. In many cases, there are things where we have to be mindful about who can benefit from that, how many people benefit from that, and what is the cost for us. So then it's likely that we, at least for a certain time, set that ticket to future, meaning we don't immediately plan that because we want to limit our backlog to 100. But future means not rejected, so it's still a valid idea, and we would like to hear about that. Okay, so you guys go.
May I say, or maybe
Anton, go ahead.
Yeah. So the most, yeah, of course, I have a lot of ideas and suggestions for OpenQA, but the most major one, and I think that they are a benefit for a lot of people, is first of all another log viewer of OpenQA logs, like with, I don't know, with font coloring, ability to filter by log error level, and so on and so on.
Okay.
This is, and may I ask if it's, I just lost, maybe I need to create feature request for this, or something already existing for?
Well, I can tell you that just in the last Hack Week, Ivan from our team invested some time to look into options for exactly that thing. Have a more fancy log viewer, of course, with color support. So yeah, it's in the back of our mind. It's also I think, let's say it's in the extended backlog. It is certainly feature requests for that do exist, but in future. So if we cover some more immediate things in the near past, then this is something that we could pick up. But of course, bringing that up by you and by multiple users also does have an impact. I'm not asking you to nag or annoy me, but if we know that more people would see that it's beneficial, then this does influence the plans.
Can I ask something related to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I saw that they did something on Hack Weekend, and I had thoughts before that. But for me, it looks very similar solution. But I don't know why we don't pass the logs through Kafka and display it in the Elasticsearch, for example. Is there a reason for this? Because this is quite very simple. The Kafka takes input, output as a config and one more level, and you have straight away some good representation of
The
your
straight away
logs.
explanation why something has not been done is simply because nobody has done it. Maybe it is actually much simpler than one thinks. Actually, I don't know the specific solution that you mentioned. If you can provide that to written form to us, we can look at it. Of course, you're very welcome if you provide a pull, if you provide a pull request, which would be a draft, and maybe it's not ready yet, maybe it's not streamlined, but just providing the idea, let's say in code, then we're also happy to look into if you can pick it up and bring it further so that this feature would be merged.
I would say it's like getting down to discussion of how to implement it, and I don't think that it's topic for this meeting. There could be a lot of different ways to implement this, and some of them are easier, others are not. But yeah, let's skip it now. Another big issue from my point is, from my understanding, is personal user preferences. Which will open a lot of field for improvements for users which see OpenQA in different way and use OpenQA in different way. And currently, obviously, you cannot provide the nice view for everyone, but having user preference will allow to make it flexible and to see every user what he expects from OpenQA.
Okay. User preferences for the OpenQA web UI.
Yes. Again, if you want me to open a feature request, just tell me. I will try to follow your pattern and present it in a nice way. Pattern for the issues. And also another big, I would say, big thing is more user-friendly filtering and search in mediums, test suites, and so on, because this entity are pretty huge in currently in OSD, and there is really like just one for example, for mediums, there is just one search field, and it's really hard to get the small list sometimes, because your keyword is also also spreading, also taking a lot of noise which you actually don't need, and there is no way to filter it out.
So extend the current
Searching
search.
capabilities for the entities like medium and machines probably too, and yeah, all the like let's say backend entities.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that this three is like, from my personal perspective, is like, I don't know, I would say 10 times more important than introducing a Python binding in OpenQA, let's say. Because you can discuss about backends improvements which you are doing, but Python binding is something which is.
Thank you for your very personal opinion.
Yes, it's just in my horrible opinion. But I actually asked, I don't want to complain here or something, I asked initially the question about some well-defined interface which allow, I don't know, to vote for the tickets, and then when you see, I don't know, that 50 users are voting for something, you would pick it up for backlog in higher priority, something like this.
We currently don't, I'm not sure. Yeah, so far it would be completely fine. There's not enough noise in the redline tickets if you just comment there and express your. That's okay for the time being. Okay. So anyway, thank you so far. I would like to close it here. I will still stay available in the room if you would like to discuss further. But for now, thank you all for attendance and have a good time until the next time. Goodbye.